I woke up as the wife of my cursed killer. The first thing I felt was warmth. A deceptive, treacherous warmth that seeped into my skin, where his arm draped heavily across my waist. His hand, large and steady, rested just above my hip bone. His fingers splayed as if to claim me even in sleep. His breath was slow and deep, brushing against the back of my neck, and for a heartbeat, just one, I let myself imagine this was love. But then memory surged like a tide, cold and merciless. I remembered that hand tightening around my throat. I remembered gasping for air that wouldn't come, the terror in my veins as darkness closed in. The last thing I'd seen had been his face, beautiful, anguished, and monstrous all at once. And now here I was, lying beside him, his wife. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the pale silver light spilling through tall windows. The bedroom was like something out of a forgotten era. High ceilings with carved beams, heavy curtains of deep blue velvet, furniture dark and polished to a mirror sheen. The scent of santal lingered in the air, mixed with the faint musk of his skin. The bed beneath us was enormous, the kind meant for kings, but it felt like a prison. I lay frozen, listening to the slow, even rhythm of his breathing. My heart beat in time with it, unwillingly tethered. My skin prickled where his touch lingered. His warmth burned like a brand. My cursed killer. My husband. And I, the fool who'd come back to life only to fall into his arms again. I swallowed, the sound loud in my ears. My throat still felt raw, though I knew it was just my mind playing cruel tricks on me. There were no bruises now, no marks of that night, except... I turned my hand slightly, just enough to see the faint scar on the inside of my wrist. A reminder. The only proof that what I remembered wasn't madness. How? Why? I didn't know. The last thing I'd seen before the darkness had claimed me was his face. Twisted in sorrow, or was it rage? And now that same face rested against my shoulder, peaceful, as if he hadn't been the one to steal my breath, as if he weren't the reason my soul had been wrenched from my body. I felt the urge to shove him away, to leap from the bed and run. But where would I go? This was his house, his domain, and now, mine too. I married him. I whispered so low even I could barely hear it. I married him again. Or maybe I never left. Maybe this was the curse. He stirred at the sound of my voice. I froze as his arm tightened slightly, his body shifting closer. His lips brushed against my hair. Aria, he murmured in his sleep, the name a sigh, a plea. My heart clenched painfully. The man who had killed me was calling my name like it was his prayer. And wasn't that just the cruelest joke of all? I stared at the moonlight tracing the edge of the windowsill, cold and distant, so unlike the heat of the man beside me. Slowly, carefully, I slid out from beneath his arm. My bare feet touched the cool wooden floor, grounding me, reminding me this was real. I stood, wrapping my arms around myself, as if I could hold myself together with sheer will. In the mirror across the room, I caught my reflection. My hair was tangled from sleep, my skin pale against the dark silk of my nightgown. My eyes. They looked haunted. Older. You're his wife now. Again. The words tasted bitter. But this time, I wouldn't be the victim. This time, I would find the truth. I would find the cracks in the perfect mask of Ethan Vale. I would learn why he'd killed me, why I was here again. And I would survive him. I took in the room once more, trying to see it not as a prisoner would, but as a hunter. The ornate bed, the heavy curtains, the old paintings of somber-eyed ancestors on the walls. Everything here spoke of legacy, of power, of secrets, and somewhere beneath all that grandeur lay the answer. A rustle behind me. I turned, heart pounding. Ethan was awake. He lay propped on one elbow, watching me with sleep-softened eyes. His dark hair was tousled, his expression unguarded. Aria, he said, his voice rough from sleep. Why are you up? Because I don't trust you. Because I remember, but I forced a smile, small and brittle. I couldn't sleep. He sat up fully, concern flickering across his face. Bad dreams? Oh, if only. Something like that. He reached out as if to pull me back to bed. I hesitated just a second too long, and I saw the confusion. The hurt flash in his eyes. I'm fine, I said quickly, stepping toward the window instead. I pushed the curtain aside and stared out at the moonlit grounds. Go back to sleep. For a moment he stayed where he was. I felt his gaze like a weight. Then he lay back down, watching me still, until at last his eyes closed again. I stood there long after, until the first hint of dawn touched the sky. And in that quiet I made my vow. I would uncover his secrets. I would see behind his mask. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to break this twisted cycle before it claimed us both. The morning passed in a blur of polite conversation, hollow smiles, and the kind of small talk that felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of secrets. Ethan was attentive, gentle even, as if he could sense my unease but didn't know how to name it. Maybe he couldn't. But my mind wasn't in the present. It kept pulling me back to that day, the day I stood across from him, dressed in white, with my heart foolishly full of hope. The memory unfolded, vivid and unrelenting. I saw myself walking down the aisle of the old chapel on the Vale estate. The chapel was beautiful in a way that sent chills down the spine, ancient stone walls, heavy wooden beams, stained glass that turned sunlight into blood-red pools on the floor. Dark relics adorned the walls, old swords, a tarnished crown, a withered wreath that was said to have belonged to the first bride of the Vale line. My dress whispered along the worn stone floor. My hands trembled inside lace gloves. And there was Ethan, waiting at the altar. He looked like something out of a dream. Dark hair combed back, sharp jaw softened by the smallest of smiles. His suit was perfectly tailored, the silver cufflinks at his wrists catching the light. But his eyes gave him away. They were shadowed, watchful, as if he were bracing for something he couldn't stop. I remember thinking it was nerves. I told myself that everyone was afraid on their wedding day. But now, standing in the present, I knew better. That memory clung to me as the day wore on. I moved through the motions, walking the gardens, exchanging soft words with the servants who greeted me as Mrs. Vale with warm smiles and lowered eyes. By evening, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Dinner was served in the grand dining hall, a room where portraits of grim ancestors watched from their gilded frames. The long table could have seated 30. It was just the two of us, seated at one end. Candles flickered in ornate holders, casting tall, quivering shadows on the walls. The scent of roasted meat, herbs, and fresh bread filled the air, but I barely tasted any of it. Ethan tried. He asked about my day. He spoke of the grounds, the gardens I might want to tend, the plans for renovating the East Wing. His voice was warm, coaxing, but there was tension beneath his words. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't speak of our family. He didn't speak of the past. I watched him carefully, trying to see the man beneath the mask. His hand lifted a glass of wine to his lips, steady and sure. But I saw the tightness in his jaw, and then I saw it. His left wrist, just below the cuff of his shirt where his sleeve had shifted. 3 thin, angry red lines, as if clawed by fingernails. I froze. "Ethan," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "What happened to your wrist?" He hesitated, just for a breath. I must have scratched myself in my sleep. A lie. I felt it in my bones, as surely as I felt the weight of those watching portraits behind us. "You should be more careful," I said softly, not trusting myself to press further. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You sound like my mother." The air between us grew heavier, thick with unspoken words. After dinner, I walked alone through the halls of the house. My fingers traced the cool stone of the walls, the wood of the banisters polished smooth by generations of hands. I tried to clear my mind, but the house seemed alive with whispers. The wind outside rattled the old windows. Floorboards creaked under my feet. Or was it something else? In the gallery, I paused before a portrait of a bride in a gown not unlike mine. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and sad. The plaque beneath the frame read, Isolde Vale, 1812 to 1830. So young. I felt as if she stared at me, warning me. That night, sleep did not come easily. I lay in bed beside Ethan, who fell into restless slumber far too quickly. His breaths came unevenly, his body twitched as if chased by unseen nightmares. I turned to face the window, watching as the moon climbed higher, casting silver bars across the floor. And then I heard it. A voice. Soft at first, like the rustle of leaves. "Aria." I froze. My heart thundered in my chest. Again. "Aria." A man's voice, deep and ancient, filled with longing. I sat up slowly, eyes scanning the room. Ethan slept on, oblivious, though his brow was furrowed, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on his skin. The voice seemed to come from nowhere, and everywhere. "Come to me." I felt a coldness seep into the room, chasing away the warmth of the blankets. The air smelled faintly of earth and decay. I clutched the sheets, fighting the urge to run. Who or what was calling me? The voice faded, like mist dissolving at dawn. But the chill remained. I lay back down, forcing myself to close my eyes, though sleep stayed far out of reach. And as I lay there, listening to Ethan's troubled breathing, I knew that whatever haunted this house had no intention of letting me go. Morning came pale and cold, the sun struggling to burn through a layer of mist that clung stubbornly to the grounds of the Vale estate. I stood at the window of my room, arms wrapped around myself, watching as the fog slowly lifted to reveal the familiar curve of the courtyard below. And then I saw him, a lone figure on horseback, moving through the gates with the weary posture of a man who'd ridden through the night. My breath caught. Ren. By the time I reached the courtyard, he was dismounting. The horse snorted and stamped its hooves as tired as its rider. Ren looked up, and for a heartbeat, it felt as though time folded in on itself. His hair was windswept, his clothes dusty from the road. There were shadows under his eyes, but his gaze was as I remembered, warm, steady, and painfully familiar. "Aria," he said, his voice rough from the cold morning air but carrying that same quiet strength that had comforted me more times than I could count. I crossed the distance between us, resisting the urge to throw my arms around him. Instead, I managed a smile that felt too small for all I felt. "You're here," I breathed. "Of course I'm here." His eyes searched mine, brow creased with worry. "You wrote." How could I stay away? The courtyard was as old as the house itself, cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. A fountain stood at its center, its stone figures half hidden beneath ivy, water trickling softly into a cracked basin. The sound was soothing, a soft counterpoint to the storm of emotions inside me. We stood there in the chill of the morning, the world quiet around us, as if holding its breath. "I thought I'd find you happy," Ren said gently. His gaze flicked briefly toward the house, then back to me. "But that's not what I see." I dropped my eyes, suddenly ashamed. Ashamed that I'd drawn him here into the shadows of this place. Ashamed that I couldn't speak the truth. I don't know what I am, Ren," I admitted, my voice low. "But I'm glad you came." His hand hovered near mine for a moment, as if he wanted to take it, then he let it fall back to his side. "You look tired," he said softly. "Haunted." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "Maybe I am." We walked the length of the courtyard, our steps slow, measured. Ren listened as I spoke in cautious half-truths, of sleepless nights, of the heaviness in the house, of Ethan's restlessness. I couldn't tell him everything. Not yet. But he saw more than I said. He always had. "There's something wrong here," Ren said at last, stopping near the fountain. His voice was quiet but certain. "I can feel it. This house, it's heavy with it. Like it's watching." I shivered despite myself. He turned to face me fully. His expression was open, kind, but beneath it, I saw the tension in his jaw, the unspoken words he held back. "Aria," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "If you're in danger, if he's hurting you, just say the word. We'll leave. I'll take you away from here." And for the briefest moment, I wanted nothing more than to say yes. To flee with him into the morning light, to leave behind these walls and the shadows that lived within them. But I couldn't, not yet. "No," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Not yet. There are things I need to understand first." He searched my face, then nodded once, though I could see the reluctance in every line of him. "I'm staying," he said simply. "You won't face this alone." That night, the house seemed to breathe around us, deep, slow, and full of secrets. Ren was given a guest room at the far end of the hall, but sleep didn't come easily to him. The wind rattled the windows, the walls seemed to sigh. Sometime past midnight, restless and uneasy, he rose and stepped into the corridor. The candles had burned low, their flames thin and flickering. Shadows stretched long across the stone floor. And then he saw him. Ethan. Moving down the hall, barefoot, shirt loose at his throat, eyes vacant, as if he walked in a dream, or a nightmare. His steps were slow, deliberate, like a man following a voice only he could hear. Ren stood frozen, torn between calling out and staying hidden. In the end, He followed. The library was the oldest part of the house, and it smelled of dust, leather, and secrets. The walls soared high, lined with shelves that groaned beneath the weight of books no one had touched in generations. A single massive window let in pale afternoon light, casting long bars across the worn rug. Above the hearth, a portrait of a grim-faced man glared down at me, one of Ethan's ancestors, his eyes as cold and dark as the storm clouds gathering outside. I stood at a table, pretending to read, though my eyes barely registered the faded words. My mind raced with everything that had happened: Ren's return, Ethan's haunted silences, the voice I'd heard in the night. I wasn't alone for long. "Aria?" I turned at the sound of Celine's voice. She stepped into the room, her boots soft against the stone floor. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd grown up in the shadows of this house and learned to navigate its dangers. She closed the door behind her, shutting out the rest of the world. "You feel it, don't you?" she said softly, coming closer. "The rot that seeps through these walls, the curse that clings to this family." I stared at her, startled not by her words, but by how right they felt. "Yes," I admitted, the word trembling on my lips. "I feel it." Celine let out a breath, as if she'd been waiting for me to say it. She gestured to the room around us. "This library holds more than books. It holds the truth, if you know where to look." She led me to a corner where the shelves were thick with dust, untouched by time. From behind a row of ancient volumes, she drew out a leather-bound tome, its cover cracked and stained. "This belonged to Aria Vale," she said, her voice low, "the man who started all of this." We settled at the table, and she opened the book. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, symbols, and diagrams that made my skin crawl just to look at them. Celine began to speak, and as she did, the room seemed to darken, as if the story itself drew the light away. Aria Vale was ambitious, brilliant, some would say, but he wanted more than wealth or power. He wanted to defy death, to make his line eternal. And so he sought out forces no man should ever touch. Her fingers traced a symbol inked into the page, a circle, bound in thorns, with a black sun at its center. He made a pact with something ancient, something hungry. In exchange for prosperity, for the protection of the Vale name, he promised what he called a sacrifice of love, a life from his bloodline, given freely to bind the deal. My stomach turned. "And it worked?" I whispered. "For a time. The Vale lands flourished, the family rose high. But the pact didn't die with Alaric. It followed his heirs. Every few generations the debt comes due. A child of the blood must be offered, or the curse consumes them all. And Ethan..." The words tasted bitter. Celine met my gaze, sorrow etched in her features. "He's next." I sat back, the weight of it all crushing down on me. I thought of Ethan's haunted eyes, his restless nights, the way he moved like a man waiting for the axe to fall. He wasn't just my killer. He was a prisoner, caught in chains forged long before he was born. And still, part of me recoiled. Part of me remembered the fear, the hands around my throat, the terror of my last breath. Could I pity him and still hate him? Could I want to save him and still want to run? I didn't know. But I knew I couldn't look away. Night fell heavy and cold. The storm that had threatened all day finally broke, rain lashing at the windows, thunder rumbling like some ancient beast. I lay awake, listening to the storm, when I felt Ethan shift beside me. He sat up, his silhouette stark against the faint light from the hearth. "Can't sleep?" I asked, my voice soft. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders tense. "I don't want to sleep." I turned toward him, my heart aching at the rawness in his voice. "Why?" He laughed bitterly. "Because when I do, I dream. And in those dreams I do things I can't control. Things that terrify me. I wake up not knowing what's real anymore." The thunder cracked, and for a moment he seemed smaller somehow. "I'm afraid I'll hurt you," he confessed. "Or worse." I reached out, my fingers brushing his. "You haven't. You won't." But we both knew the lie in those words. He looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw a man drowning, desperate for something to hold on to. "I don't want to be this," he said, voice breaking. "I don't want to be him." Neither did I. But the past had its claws in both of us. And somehow, I had to find a way to set us free. The entrance to the underground passages lay hidden behind a crumbling tapestry in the east wing. Forgotten, perhaps, or simply ignored by those who preferred not to disturb the dead things that slept beneath the house. Ren had found it, of course. He always saw what others missed. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, holding the flickering lantern higher, its glow casting long shadows on the damp stone walls. I nodded, my pulse quickening. "I need to understand what we're facing. And I think the answers are down here." The air grew colder as we descended, the steps worn smooth by centuries of use. The smell of damp earth and mildew filled my lungs, and I had to fight the urge to gag. Water dripped somewhere in the dark, each drop echoing like a warning. We moved slowly, the lantern's light dancing over carvings that lined the walls, symbols I didn't understand, scenes of men kneeling before dark shapes, of blood poured into bowls at ancient altars. My skin prickled with every step. "This place," Ren murmured. "It was never meant to be found. But we were here." The corridor ended in a small chamber, the walls lined with niches where once, perhaps, offerings had been placed. The floor was slick with moisture, and the air felt thick, as if it held its breath. And there, half buried beneath fallen stones and rotted cloth, we found it. A map, ink faded but still legible, showing a path that led beyond the estate grounds, into the forest, to a place marked only with a symbol, a circle of thorns, the black sun at its heart. And beside it, a book, a journal, its cover warped and pages brittle. I opened it carefully, and the words of a long-dead Vale ancestor stared back at me. His handwriting was tight, desperate, the ramblings of a man who'd bargained with darkness and come to regret it. I made the pact. The price was blood. I thought I could choose whose. I was wrong. The darkness chooses. A chill ran through me. We stayed longer than we should have, poring over the journal, memorizing the map. And so we didn't hear Ethan until it was too late. "Aria?" His voice, raw and uncertain, echoed off the stone. I turned, the lantern's light catching his face as he stepped into the chamber. His eyes flicked from me to Ren, to the book in my hands. And I saw it, the hurt, the way his shoulders tensed, the way his mouth tightened. "You're afraid of me?" The words fell between us like stones. "No," I began, but he shook his head. "It's in your eyes. Both of you." And he was right. Ren took a step back, his posture protective. But Ethan didn't move toward us. He just stood there, the weight of all his guilt and shame pressing him down. "I don't blame you," Ethan said, voice hollow. "I wouldn't trust me either." The silence that followed was thick with everything we couldn't say. That night, the storm returned, the wind howling around the house like a beast circling its prey. Sleep, when it came, was fitful. I woke to the sound of the wind, to the groan of old wood, to the whisper of my own breath quick and shallow. And then I felt it, the shift in the air. I sat up, heart racing, and saw Ethan standing at the window, his back to me. But something was wrong. His posture was rigid, unnatural. His hands were clenched at his sides, trembling. "Ethan?" I whispered. He didn't respond. And then I saw it, a shadow darker than night itself, coiling behind him like smoke, like a living thing. It rose, taking shape, its form human and yet not, its eyes empty pits that seemed to drink in the light. "Ethan!" I called louder, rising from the bed. He flinched as if waking from a dream, but the shadow didn't fade. It loomed closer, its edges flickering like flame. I reached for him, my fingers brushing his arm. His skin was ice. "Come back to me," I pleaded. The shadow hissed, a sound like wind through dead leaves, and for a heartbeat I thought it would swallow him whole. But Ethan turned, his eyes meeting mine, filled with terror, but also with recognition. And in that instant, the shadow recoiled, retreating into the dark corners of the room, leaving only the echo of its presence behind. We stood there in the silence, breathing hard, the storm outside forgotten. And I knew the darkness wasn't done with us yet. The world beyond the walls of Vale House felt almost unreal. The heavy stone, the suffocating rooms, the weight of the curse, all of it seemed to cling to my skin as we left, like a second shadow. We rode in silence at first, the four of us, Ethan, Celine, Ren, and me. The horses moved steadily up the narrow forest path, hooves muffled by moss and fallen leaves. Above us, the sky was pale and heavy, the air thick with mist that clung to the trees and curled around our legs like cold fingers. No birds sang here. No creatures stirred in the underbrush. It felt as though even the forest held its breath, The path narrowed as we climbed higher, the trees growing older, their gnarled roots twisting through the earth like veins. Every so often we passed a stone sentinel, statues half swallowed by the forest, their faces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. They stood silent guard over this place, their hollow eyes following us as we passed. Celine rode ahead, her expression grim, as if she bore the burden of all the generations before us. Ethan kept close to my side, his shoulders tense, his eyes always searching the shadows. And Ren rode just behind me, watching, waiting. It was Ren who finally broke the silence. Aria. His voice was soft, but in the quiet of the woods it carried. I glanced back at him, heart tight. I should have said this sooner, before all of this. Before it was too late. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I've loved you for as long as I can remember. But I don't say this to make things harder for you. I opened my mouth, but he held up a hand, stopping me gently. You don't owe me anything. I just want you to know. I want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. My throat tightened. Ren. But he shook his head, his smile softening. I'm not asking for anything, Aria. I just needed you to know. Before we face whatever's coming. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. He hadn't meant to hear, I was sure of it. But the pain that flickered in his eyes told me he had. And yet, he said nothing. The path grew steeper, the forest darker. The mist thickened, swallowing the trees whole until it felt as though we moved through a world of ghosts. At last, we broke through the trees into a clearing. The sanctuary. It was older than the forest, older than the house, older than the curse that brought us here. A circle of standing stones rose from the earth, their surfaces etched with runes worn deep by time. Moss clung to their bases, and in the center of the circle, the ground was bare. No grass, no weeds, only stone and dirt, as if the earth itself refused to reclaim this place. The air was colder here, the silence deeper. Celine dismounted first, tying her horse to a low branch. She stood at the edge of the circle, her head bowed. We're here, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan and I followed, and Ren came last, his eyes never leaving me. I stepped into the circle, feeling the weight of it settle over me like a mantle. The air hummed, as if the very stones remembered all the blood, all the bargains, all the broken promises made here. Ethan's hand found mine, his grip tight, his skin cold. Whatever happens, he said, voice low and fierce, I won't let it take me. I won't let it take us. And as we stood together, surrounded by the stones, I prayed that would be enough. The air inside the stone circle felt thicker, charged with something old and waiting. The standing stones loomed around us like silent witnesses, their runes faintly glowing in the dusk. The last of the daylight bled from the sky, and shadows crept inward, swallowing the clearing whole. Celine stood at the edge of the circle, the ancient book open in her hands. Her face was pale in the fading light, but her voice was steady as she began to read. The words were in a language I didn't know, but their sound chilled me. They weren't meant for human ears. They belonged to the earth, the wind, the dark places beneath the world. The ground seemed to pulse beneath my feet, as if the land itself remembered the rituals performed here long ago. The air grew colder, the mist thickening until the stones felt miles apart, each of us stranded alone within the circle. And then, he came. At first, it was only a shift in the shadows, a darkness that moved where no darkness should. But soon it took shape, a figure taller than any man, its edges frayed and flickering like smoke, its eyes hollow voids that sucked the warmth from the air. The spirit of the ancestor. The curse given form. It moved toward Ethan, drawn to him, as if it smelled the blood it was owed. Ethan staggered back, breath coming fast, his eyes wide with terror and fury. No, he whispered, not again. I won't. But the spirit surged closer, and I saw it. The way it reached for him, tendrils of darkness curling around him, seeping into his skin. His body tensed, his hands clenched, as if fighting something inside him. Ethan! I cried, but he didn't seem to hear me. His gaze was locked on the spirit, or perhaps on something only he could see. The weight of generations pressing down on him. And so I did the only thing I could. I stepped between them. The cold hit me like a wave, stealing my breath, biting into my bones. But I didn't move. I reached for Ethan's hand, and when our fingers met, it was like a spark, a jolt that ran through us both. His eyes met mine, wild and afraid. Aria, I'm here, I said, though my voice shook. I won't let it take you. The spirit recoiled for a moment, as if confused. Its form wavered, the darkness flickering. And in that space between heartbeats, I understood. It wasn't just blood the curse demanded. It was surrender, and we would not give it. Ethan gripped my hand tighter, and together we turned to face the spirit. No more, I said, my voice rising. You have no claim on us. Ethan's voice joined mine, stronger than I'd ever heard it. We choose each other, not the past, not the curse. The air crackled around us, the runes on the stones flaring bright, their light cutting through the mist. We break the chain, I said. We give no more, Ethan finished. The spirit shrieked, a sound that tore at the sky itself. The tendrils of darkness thrashed, but they couldn't reach us. The light from the stones grew blinding, filling the circle with brilliance. And then, a flash, white and pure and endless. The spirit unraveled, its form dissolving into ash, into wind, into nothing at all. The ground stilled. The air cleared, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. We stood there, trembling, as the last of the light faded. Celine lowered the book, tears streaming down her face, tears of relief, of release. The stones stood quiet again, the runes dark. The mist was gone. Ethan turned to me, his hand still in mine, his eyes shining with something I hadn't seen before. Peace. It's over, he said, his voice hoarse. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. We had done it. Together, we had broken the chain that bound us. And the night, for the first time, felt like ours. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, soft and golden, washing the world in a glow that felt almost unreal. The mist that had haunted the forest now clung gently to the earth, no longer a shroud of fear but a quiet veil of peace. I opened my eyes to find myself cradled in Ethan's arms, the two of us lying together in the heart of the sanctuary. The stones stood silent around us, their ancient runes dark and still, as if even they had been granted rest at last. His breathing was slow and steady, his face relaxed in sleep, free of the tension that had haunted him for so long. For a moment, I didn't move. I just listened to the sound of his heart, felt the rise and fall of his chest, and let the quiet seep into me. For the first time, my soul felt still. The weight I'd carried for what felt like lifetimes had lifted, leaving only a deep, aching relief. The ground beneath us was cool and damp, the scent of pine and wet earth filling the air. A breeze stirred the leaves at the edge of the clearing, carrying with it the promise of something new. Ethan stirred beside me, his eyes fluttering open. When they met mine, they were clear. No shadows, no fear. Just him. Good morning, he whispered, his voice rough from sleep, but warm in a way that made my chest tighten. Good morning, I said, and smiled. We rose together, fingers still twined, unwilling to let go just yet. The forest stretched around us, bathed in the soft light of dawn. Birds began to sing, tentative at first, then bolder, as if they too sensed that the darkness had passed. Wren stood at the edge of the clearing, his horse already saddled. His eyes met mine and he smiled, a real smile, gentle and sure. I should go, he said quietly. There's a world out there I need to see. And I think you found yours. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Thank you, I said. For everything? He shrugged lightly, though his gaze softened. I meant what I said, Aria. I want you to be happy, and I think you will be. He glanced at Ethan, and for a breath, I saw the unspoken understanding pass between them. Then Wren mounted his horse, gave us one last look, and turned toward the trees. The sound of his horse's hooves faded into the woods, leaving behind only the hush of morning. Celine approached, her expression calm but resolute. It's done, she said. But the house, the family. There's work still to do. I nodded. You'll see to it. She smiled faintly. I will. I won't let this happen again. Not to anyone. There was strength in her, the kind that could carry the weight of generations. And I knew, as surely as I knew the sun would rise, that she would keep her promise. Ethan and I remained in the clearing long after the others had gone, standing side by side as the sun climbed higher, casting the stones in soft gold. The wind stirred his hair, and he turned to me, his eyes bright with something I hadn't dared hope for. Are you ready? He asked. For what? For whatever comes next. I looked out at the horizon, at the world waiting beyond these woods, and I felt no fear. Yes, I said. I am. And as we watched the sun rise over the trees, hand in hand, I knew that this was only the beginning, of us, of hope, of a future free from the shadows of the past.